What is this performance? You're paid to manage a house, not stage a pantomime. The voice sliced through the manicured quiet of the afternoon, sharp and cold as the edge of a new coin. And in this sprawling 10-acre estate of limestone and glass, he did. His arrival was, as always, unannounced. The silent purr of his German sedan was the only warning, and by the time its tires crunched on the pristine white gravel of the circular drive, he was already out of the car, his presence a sudden drop in barometric pressure. Lena Vance, his head housekeeper, did not flinch. She stood on the impossibly green lawn, a stretch of turf so perfect that before her were two junior housekeepers, Maria and Chloe, their crisp gray uniforms stark against the vibrant landscape. She held 3 fingers up, a silent command, and Chloe, the newer of the two, immediately pointed toward. Lena shook her head once, a minute, almost imperceptible gesture. Chloe's hand wavered, then darted toward the main gate. Lena nodded. Only then did she turn to face him. Mr. Sterling stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his bespoke suit unwrinkled. He was a man of systems, of brutal efficiency, and he saw the world as a series of assets to be managed and liabilities to be minimized. Anything that fell outside those 2 columns was a distraction. Mr. Sterling, Lena said. Her voice was even, a calm lake surface against his jagged cliff face. Welcome home. We weren't expecting you. Clearly, he replied, his eyes sweeping over the 2 younger women who now stood frozen, their impromptu lesson dissolving into raw fear. I fly 13 hours to ensure my operations are running at peak efficiency, and I find my senior staff. It wasn't a request for information. It was a demand for justification, with the implicit threat that none would suffice. Lena's mind worked with the same quiet precision as her hands when she chose her words carefully, knowing that with a man like Sterling, vocabulary was a minefield. I'm ensuring the new staff understand the property's sightlines and exit routes, she explained, her gaze steady. In the event of an emergency, hesitation can be costly. Sterling's lips thinned into a bloodless line. He despised euphemisms and corporate jargon, especially from those he paid to scrub his floors and polish his silver. It was an encroachment, a blurring of the rigid lines he'd drawn around his life. An emergency. The only emergency I see is a dereliction of duty. The brass on the main staircase has not been polished today. I can see the tarnish from here. Maria's station has dust on the skirting boards. I noticed it this morning on the security feed from my office in Zurich. And you are out here, mapping sightlines. The casual mention of him watching them from thousands of miles away was designed to intimidate, to remind them that they were always under his microscope. It worked on Maria and Chloe, who both shrank, their eyes fixed on the ground. Would you be able to stand there, subjected to that kind of scrutiny, and not break? Lena simply absorbed the blow, her posture unchanged. The interior duties are scheduled for the next rotation, sir. A full team is assigned to the formal areas at 1600 hours after the sun is off the west-facing windows to prevent streaking. The drills take 10 minutes of their mid-afternoon lull. It increases efficiency in the long run. She was speaking his language, efficiency, scheduling, rotations. It was a strategic verbal shield. For a moment, he seemed to be considering the logic of it, his analytical mind processing the input. But his desire for absolute control, for his world to operate exactly as he designed it, won out. Your system is not my system, he said, the words dropping like stones in the silence. My system is the one you will adhere to, the one outlined in the 140-page manual I provided upon your employment. You will recall, Miss Vance, that it contains no chapter on lawn theater. He walked past her, his shoulder nearly brushing hers, a subtle act of physical dismissal. He stopped in front of the 2 younger women. Your job is to clean what you are told to clean when you are told to clean it. You are to remain invisible unless required. You do not run, you do not point, and you do not play games. You understand? Yes, Mr. Sterling, they whispered in unison, their voices barely audible. He didn't spare them another glance. He began walking toward the towering oak doors of the main house, his footsteps unnaturally loud on the gravel path. As he reached the entrance, he paused without turning back. Miss Vance, he called out, his voice echoing slightly against the stone facade. A final thought. Initiative is a quality I admire in my corporate boardroom. In my home, it is a liability. Confine your creative energies to stain removal. The heavy door clicked shut behind him, the sound as final as a gavel strike. Lena stood for a long moment, the quiet rushing back in to fill the space he had occupied. The sun was warm on her face. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the ancient oaks that dotted the property. It was a perfect, peaceful day, but the air was now thick with a familiar poison, the quiet, suffocating weight of being utterly misjudged. She turned back to Maria and Chloe. Their faces were pale, their fear palpable. She gave them a small, reassuring nod. Then, before leading them back inside to face the work, and the man awaiting them, she held up 2 fingers. It was the signal for a fire emergency. Her eyes guided theirs, not to the main gate this time, but to the low stone wall bordering the woods, the designated muster point. It was a silent, final act of defiance, an insistence that her system was not a game. It was a promise of safety in a house that offered none. An hour later, Lena was in the staff office, a small, meticulously organized room in the basement that served as the nerve center for the household. It was her sanctuary, the one space where the suffocating perfection of the upper floors was replaced by practical reality. Schedules were pinned to a corkboard, inventory lists were neatly filed, and on her desk sat the source of Mr. Sterling's disapproval, a thick, 3-ring binder, its plastic cover a bold, defiant red. The door opened without a knock. Mr. Sterling stood there, having changed into casual trousers and a polo shirt, a transformation that somehow made him look even more menacing. He was no longer a corporate raider in a suit but a feudal lord surveying his domain. His eyes immediately landed on the red binder. "That thing," he said, pointing with his chin. "I want to see it." Lena slid it across her desk. He picked it up as if it were a soiled object, his fingers barely touching the edges. He flipped it open. The pages were a kaleidoscope of Lena's mind, color-coded tabs for each section of the house, laminated checklists, and hand-drawn diagrams of the floor plans. Arrows in blue indicated primary evacuation routes. Arrows in orange indicated secondary ones. There were lists of emergency contacts, not just 911, but the direct numbers for the fire marshal, the head of the local power company, and the estate's private security firm. There was a section on medical emergencies, with notes on the known allergies of every staff member in the Sterling family. He scoffed, a dry, dismissive sound. "Arts and crafts," he muttered, echoing his earlier sentiment. He flipped to a page detailing the chemical composition of various cleaning agents and the appropriate response to accidental ingestion or spillage. "You have far too much time on your hands, Miss Vance." "I use my time to anticipate, Mr. Sterling. It saves time in a crisis." He closed the binder with a sharp snap, the sound making Maria, who was quietly polishing a silver tray in the corner, jump. "A crisis," he repeated, his voice dripping with condescension. "The last crisis we had was a blown fuse in the wine cellar, an event that was handled by my electrician, whom I pay a handsome retainer for precisely that purpose. Your job is to prevent tarnish, not to plan for Armageddon." He slid the binder back across the desk, a gesture of finality. "This house has an official operating manual. It was compiled by the best risk management consultants in the business. It is thorough, it is legally sound, and it is the only system of record for this property. Your scrapbook is not." The word hung in the air, scrapbook. It was a deliberate, targeted insult designed to diminish her work, to frame her meticulous planning as a silly, sentimental hobby. Have you ever poured your expertise into something, only to have it dismissed with a single, demeaning word? Lena felt a familiar heat rise in her chest, but she tamped it down. Her face remained a mask of professional calm. She simply took the binder and placed it back in its designated spot on the corner of her desk. She would not hide it. It was not a scrapbook. It was a testament to a level of care he could not comprehend. "Sir," she said, her voice low but firm. "The official manual has a protocol for a power outage. It states, and I quote, 'In the event of a power failure, locate the main circuit board and await professional assistance.' That process takes an average of 45 minutes. My protocol restored power to the West Wing in 90 seconds during the ambassador's dinner last month." It was a risk, challenging him with his own logic. She watched his jaw tighten. He was not a man who enjoyed being corrected, especially by an employee he viewed as little more than a cog in a machine. He saw her competence not as an asset, but as an anomaly that threatened his own sense of order. "The next time there is a power outage, Miss Vance," he said, his voice dangerously soft, "you will follow the manual. You will do nothing. You will await professional assistance. Your job is to manage the staff, not the infrastructure. Stay in your lane." He turned and left, the silence he left behind feeling louder than his words. Maria looked at Lena, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. Lena gave her a small, tight smile. The lines had been drawn. The red binder was no longer just a set of procedures, it was a symbol of her professional integrity, and he had just declared war on it. The following morning, an envelope was waiting on Lena's desk. It was made of thick, cream-colored cardstock, the kind Mr. Sterling used for his most important correspondence. Her name was typed on the front, Miss Lena Vance. There was no warmth in it, just cold, hard type. Her hands were steady as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a formal memo printed under the letterhead of Sterling Global Holdings. The subject line read, "Directive on Household Management and Emergency Protocols." The body of the memo was brief and brutal. It stated that, effective immediately, all staff training, daily procedures, and emergency responses were to adhere, without deviation, to the official Sterling Estate Management Handbook, version 7.2. It explicitly forbade the creation or implementation of any unsanctioned, informal, or personalized protocols. The final sentence was underlined. "Failure to comply with this directive will be considered a material breach of your employment contract and will result in immediate termination." At the bottom was a line for her signature, next to the word "acknowledged." This was it, the no way back moment. It wasn't a verbal warning that could be debated or misinterpreted. It was a legal document, a cage of words designed to lock her into his system and throw away the key to her own. He was forcing her to choose, her job or her principles. He knew, of course, that for most people in her position, that was no choice at all. What would you do next? Would you sign away your judgment to keep your livelihood? She stared at the paper for a long time. She thought of Maria's nervous hands, of Chloe's uncertainty. She thought of the labyrinthine hallways of the house, the hidden dangers no consultant could ever see, the subtle risks only someone who lived and breathed the space every day could understand. The official handbook was designed to protect Mr. Sterling from lawsuits. Her red binder was designed to protect the people from harm. He was asking her to sign a document that prioritized the former over the latter. At precisely 900 a.m., she was summoned to his study. The room was a monument to his ego, all dark wood, leather, and displays of his corporate conquests. He was on the phone, closing a deal worth more than she would make in 100 lifetimes. He gestured for her to sit, not even bothering to pause his conversation. She remained standing. When he finally hung up, he swiveled his chair to face her, his eyes cold. "You received my memo." "Yes, sir," she said. She placed the unsigned document on his vast, polished desk. He glanced down at the empty signature line. "Is there a problem?" "I have a question," she said, her voice betraying no emotion. "The handbook's fire protocol on page 42 instructs staff to evacuate and call for help. This estate is over 15,000 square feet with multiple wings. Where specifically are we to evacuate to?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Away from the danger, obviously. A panicked group of people running in different directions is not an evacuation, Mr. Sterling. It's a stampede. A muster point is essential for accountability, to ensure everyone is safe." "Your concern is noted," he said, his tone making it clear it was not. "Now, sign the document." "There is also the matter of the fire extinguishers," she continued, her resolve hardening. "The manual calls for Class A extinguishers to be placed every 75 feet. A grease fire in the kitchen or an electrical fire in the server room would be spread by a Class A. It would be like throwing gasoline on the flames. That is not a protocol. It is a liability." He was silent for a moment, his mask of bored authority cracking to reveal a flicker of raw anger. He had expected compliance, not a lecture on fire safety. He stood up, towering over her. "You have 5 seconds to sign that paper, Miss Vance, or your employment here is terminated." She looked at him, then at the pen he pushed toward her. She picked it up. He smiled, a thin, triumphant curl of his lips. She uncapped the pen, and with a hand that did not tremble, she signed her name. He took the paper, satisfied. "Good, I'm glad we understand each other." "We do," Lena said, her voice quiet but clear. "You have a signed piece of paper, and I have my responsibilities. They are not always the same thing." She turned and walked out of the study, the door closing softly behind her. She had signed the order, but she had not surrendered. She had simply acknowledged the battle lines. The game had changed. Now her work wasn't just about safety, it was an act of quiet rebellion. 2 weeks passed. Lena adhered to the letter of Sterling's law. The drills stopped. The red binder remained on her desk, a silent observer. She managed her staff with the same quiet efficiency, her instructions now carefully worded to align with the official manual, even when she knew its directives were flawed. She was a model of compliance, but she was also watching, waiting. The opportunity came during one of Mr. Sterling's rare dinner parties. He was hosting a notoriously difficult tech billionaire, a man he was trying to woo into a partnership. The entire house was on high alert. The menu was meticulously planned, the wine pairings debated for days, and the staff were drilled on the guests' eccentricities. Dinner was served in the main dining hall, a cavernous room with a 20-foot ceiling and a single, priceless chandelier that glittered with 1,000 crystals. As the main course was being served, the lights flickered once, twice, then died. The room plunged into an inky blackness, broken only by the faint glow of the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows. A collective gasp went through the guests, a nervous titter of laughter. Mr. Sterling's voice cut through the dark, tight with fury. "What is going on?" The emergency lights, which were supposed to kick in, failed to do so. Another flaw in the official plan. Maria, who was serving the wine, let out a small, terrified squeak. "Stay calm, everyone," Sterling commanded, his voice strained. He was already on his phone, yelling at his head of security. "Get the electrician on the line, now." From the corner of the room, Lena moved. She didn't run. Her movements were fluid and purposeful. The younger staff were frozen in place, but Chloe watched as Lena retrieved a high-powered flashlight from a small, discreetly mounted panel near the service door, a location she had designated, not the manual. "Maria, stay with the guests. Assure them we are handling it," Lena said in a low voice. "Chloe with me." She navigated the darkened service corridors as if she had infrared vision, her flashlight beam cutting a clean path. She didn't head to the main circuit board in the basement, the one the manual designated. Instead, she led Chloe to a sub-panel hidden behind a tapestry in the West Gallery. It was an old, forgotten part of the house's wiring, something the high-paid consultants had missed. She opened her shoulder bag and pulled out the red binder. Did you catch what she just did? She hadn't left her expertise on the desk. She carried it with her. She flipped to a diagram she had drawn herself, a complex map of the house's convoluted electrical system. Her flashlight beam illuminated the page. "He thought he could lock her knowledge in a drawer," Chloe would whisper to Maria later. But she had it all in her head. The binder was just the backup. Lena cross-referenced her diagram with the panel's labels. The overload came from the new security system he had installed. It was wired into the same circuit as the dining hall, she murmured, more to herself than to Chloe. A classic mistake. With a confident flick of her wrist, she tripped a secondary breaker, rerouting power from a more stable part of the grid. She reset the main switch. Upstairs, the grand chandelier flickered back to life, its crystals showering the room in a brilliant welcome light. The guests applauded. Mr. Sterling, still on the phone, barked his thanks and hung up, assuming his call had produced the result. He never knew that his world-class electrician was still 20 minutes away, stuck in traffic. As Lena and Chloe returned to the dining room, slipping back into the shadows of their roles, Sterling's guest leaned toward him. "Your staff is remarkably efficient," he said, impressed. Sterling nodded, taking the credit. "I demand the best." He glanced briefly toward the service door, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He had no proof, but he knew. The seamless, silent fix had her fingerprints all over it. It was a small win, a flash of light in the darkness, but it was immediately undermined by the cold reality he hadn't thanked her. He hadn't even acknowledged her. Her competence was just another part of the service he was owed. In the rigid, sterile world of the Sterling estate, Maria was a wildflower that had sprouted through a crack in the concrete. She was young, barely 20, and had come from a small town with dreams of sending money back to her family. But the immense pressure of the house, the constant scrutiny, and Mr. Sterling's explosive temper had left her a bundle of nerves. Her hands trembled whenever she carried a tray, and she lived in mortal fear of making a mistake that would cost her the job. Lena saw her own past in Maria's wide, frightened eyes. She saw the girl who had once been told she wasn't smart enough, wasn't good enough, wasn't meant for more than the life she was born into. After the directive was signed, Lena could no longer conduct her drills, but she could still teach. She just had to be more subtle. She began to mentor Maria not through formal training but through small, quiet moments. She didn't teach her how to clean, she taught her how to be. While they were polishing silver, Lena would talk about breathing. In through the nose for 4 counts, out through the mouth for 6, she'd say softly. It slows the heart. A steady heart makes for a steady hand. One afternoon, Maria was tasked with replacing the orchids in the grand foyer, a job that required climbing a stepladder to reach the towering marble mantelpiece. Mr. Sterling was in a nearby room, his voice a low rumble on a conference call. The threat of his presence was enough to make Maria's hands slick with sweat. As she reached for a heavy crystal vase, it slipped. She gasped, fumbling, the priceless object teetering on the edge. Before it could fall, Lena's hands were there, strong and sure, encasing Maria's. She didn't just grab the vase. She steadied Maria, her touch a silent transfer of calm and confidence. "I've got you," Lena whispered, their faces inches apart. "Breathe. 4 in, 6 out." Maria's panicked breath slowly evened out. Together they lowered the vase to safety. Lena didn't scold or lecture. She simply looked Maria in the eyes. "He sees fear," she said, her voice barely audible, a direct echo of her earlier advice. "He thinks it's a weakness he can control. Let's show him focus instead. Focus is a strength he doesn't understand." This bond became Maria's anchor. She started to move with more confidence, her steps more certain. She learned to see the house through Lena's eyes, not as a museum of fragile objects, but as a system of interconnected parts. She began to notice things: a loose floorboard on the stairs, a faint smell of ozone from a struggling appliance. She would report them quietly to Lena, becoming her eyes and ears. The connection between them was a silent, blooming thing in the cold house. It was a relationship built not on authority, but on shared vulnerability and mutual respect. If you were there, would you step closer to someone like Maria, or would you stay silent, afraid to draw the master's attention? This bond created a new, profound moral obligation for Lena. Her fight was no longer just about abstract principles of safety. It was about protecting this girl, this fragile, hopeful person who had been placed in her care. Maria's safety was now inextricably linked to the validation of the red binder. To fail would be to let Maria down, to allow the crushing weight of the house to extinguish her small, flickering light. And that, Lena vowed, would not happen on her watch. Lena waited for the right moment. It came on a quiet Tuesday when Mr. Sterling was in Asia for the week and a fragile sense of peace had settled over the estate. She found Maria in the staff office, carefully reviewing the daily schedule. "You have a minute?" Lena asked. Maria nodded, her pen poised over the checklist. Lena pulled the official Sterling Estate Management Handbook from its shelf. It was a heavy, leather-bound tome, its gold leaf title gleaming under the fluorescent lights. It looked important. It felt authoritative. It was also, as Lena knew, a masterfully crafted illusion of safety. She opened it to page 42, the top of which was titled Section 9, Emergency Procedures. She slid the book in front of Maria. "Read this paragraph," she said, pointing to the 3rd entry. Maria leaned forward, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her lips moved silently as she read the dense, legalistic text. "It says, in the event of a fire, staff members are to immediately cease all activities and proceed to the nearest designated exit." Maria read aloud, her voice hesitant. "Upon exiting the structure, contact the appropriate emergency services by dialing 911. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to combat the fire or retrieve personal or company property." She looked up at Lena, confused. "It seems simple." "It is," Lena said. "Dangerously simple. Now think about it. You're in the East Wing laundry room, a dryer ignites. Where is your nearest designated exit?" Maria thought for a moment. "The service door, I suppose. And Chloe is in the main library. Where is hers?" "The front entrance." Exactly, Lena said, her voice sharp with purpose. You exit south, she exits north. The fire department arrives. Their first question is everyone out? Who answers? You don't know where Chloe is. She doesn't know where you are. What if one of the gardeners was in the greenhouse? What if a guest was in the spa? This protocol doesn't get people to safety. It scatters them to the wind. The color drained from Maria's face as the realization dawned. Have you ever seen a rule that looked fair on the surface, but was actually a weapon in disguise? Now look at this, Lena continued, her tone urgent. She pulled out the red binder and opened it to a color-coded map of the estate. Muster point A by the old oak tree for any incident on the ground floor. Muster point B by the front gate for any incident on the second floor. Simple. Organized. Everyone is accounted for in minutes. She then pointed back to the official handbook. This book isn't designed to protect us, Maria. It's designed to protect him. It's a legal document created by his lawyers to transfer all liability in a disaster. If something goes wrong and we follow these rules, the insurance company can say the staff performed as directed. The protocol was simply insufficient for the event. But if we deviate, if we try to do the smart thing and something goes wrong, then it's our fault. The blame falls on us. He's covered either way. She closed the heavy leather book. The trap was laid bare. It wasn't just a set of bad rules, it was a cage. It presented them with an impossible choice: comply with a dangerous policy and risk their lives for the sake of his legal protection, or resist it, use their own judgment, and risk their jobs and their futures if anything went wrong. His rulebook protects the property from lawsuits, Lena said, her eyes meeting Maria's. My book protects the people in it. Maria stared at the two binders, the heavy, ornate leather one and the simple, practical red plastic one. For the first time, she understood the real battle Lena was fighting. It wasn't about pride or defiance. It was about survival. Mr. Sterling returned from Asia like a storm front, the placid atmosphere of the house immediately turning turbulent. He was a man who could sense any shift in the currents of his domain. And he sensed that Lena's quiet influence, her whisper network of competence and care, had not been extinguished. He'd seen it in the way Maria now met his gaze with a steady, professional calm instead of her usual terrified deference. He'd seen it in the subtle, efficient way the staff moved, a harmony that was not in his manual. He summoned Lena to the library. The sun was setting, casting long, ominous shadows across the rows of unread books. He didn't ask her to sit. I've been reviewing the security logs from my trip, he began, his voice deceptively mild. I noticed you and Maria spent 20 minutes in the staff office on Tuesday with the handbook, an impromptu study session. Lena's blood ran cold, but her expression remained neutral. I was clarifying her duties for the week. Were you? Sterling walked over to the fireplace, picking up a heavy iron poker and idly tracing the grout lines between the stones. Because my head of security in London, who is an expert lip reader, tells me you were discussing fire protocols. My fire protocols, and how you find them inadequate. The casual, chilling mention of a lip reader in another continent was a raw display of his power. He was reminding her that there were no private spaces, no secret conversations. He saw everything. I believe uniformity is the bedrock of excellence, he said, turning to face her. His rationale was not that of a cartoon villain. It was the cold, hard logic of a global CEO. I manage 12 properties, 3 yachts, and a fleet of aircraft across 9 countries. I cannot have a dozen different systems. I cannot have a dozen different Lenas, each with her own binder of bright ideas. I require a single, replicable, predictable system. Your way may be better for this house, but it is poison to my enterprise. It introduces variables. I eliminate variables. He put the poker back in its stand with a metallic clang. You are an excellent manager, Miss Vance, but you are a variable. You are teaching my staff to think for themselves. And while that may sound noble in a classroom, in my world, it is a precursor to chaos. The blow landed. He was punishing her not for being bad at her job, but for being too good. He was threatened by the very competence he claimed to demand. You are on formal probation, effective immediately, he declared. You will have no direct training responsibilities with junior staff. Your duties will be restricted to inventory, scheduling, and inspections. Maria will now report to the head butler. I am isolating you. I am containing the variable. Do we understand each other? The door to her mentorship, to her ability to protect Maria, had been slammed shut. She was being walled off, her expertise deemed a contamination. She felt a profound sense of isolation, the system pushing back with all its immense impersonal weight. What would you sacrifice to stay true to what you know is right? Your influence, your purpose, your job. Yes, Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice a hollow echo in the grand room. She walked out, leaving him standing by the fire. She went to her small office in the basement. She sat at her desk and looked at the red binder. For a moment she felt the crushing weight of defeat. He had beaten her. He had used his power, his money, and his surveillance to corner her. She could just give up. Do her inspections, collect her paycheck, and let the flawed system run its course. But then she thought of Maria's hands, trembling on that vase. She thought of the cold, legalistic words on page 42. She thought of the lies people tell themselves, that they are safe, that the rules will protect them. She placed her hand on the smooth, red plastic cover of the binder. It was not a scrapbook. It was not a variable. It was the truth, and she would not abandon it. In the quiet of the empty room, she made a silent vow. He could take away her duties, he could isolate her, he could threaten her, but he could not make her forget what she knew. When the time came, she would be ready. The proving ground arrived, as it often does, not with a thunderclap but with the mundane sizzle of oil in a pan. Mr. Sterling was hosting a dinner, a crucial one. His guest was a famously reclusive investor, a man whose backing could secure a multi-billion-dollar acquisition for Sterling Global Holdings. The tension in the house was a palpable thing, a low hum of anxiety that set everyone on edge. In the kitchen, a new agency chef, a young prodigy named Julian, was feeling the pressure most acutely. He was brilliant but arrogant, and he had dismissed the estate's kitchen staff with a wave of his hand. He worked alone, a whirlwind of frantic, creative energy. He was searing scallops for the appetizer, using a custom-blended oil heated to a precise, dangerously high temperature. Distracted for a crucial second by a notification on his phone, he turned back to the stove too late. The oil had passed its smoke point. A wisp of black smoke turned into a flicker of yellow flame, which then erupted. With a terrifying whoosh, the entire pan became a roiling ball of fire. Julian panicked. His culinary school training vanished in a wave of pure adrenaline. He did the single worst thing he could do. He grabbed the pan, intending to take it to the sink. The movement fed the flames, and a lick of fire shot up the wall, igniting a film of grease near the industrial ventilation hood. His scream was sharp and high-pitched. It cut through the low murmur of conversation in the nearby dining room. Lena was in the service corridor, reviewing the wine inventory, her duties now relegated to such mundane tasks. But her senses were, as always, on high alert. She didn't just hear the scream, she analyzed it. It wasn't a cry of surprise, it was a shriek of terror. And beneath it she heard the hungry crackle of a fire finding purchase. Before the first smoke alarm had even begun its piercing shriek, she was moving. All the drills she had run, all the scenarios she had mapped out in her binder, all the knowledge he had tried to suppress, it all came online in an instant. This is where everything could flip. She didn't run toward the chaos. She ran toward the solution. She passed the small alcove where the official class extinguisher was mounted, ignoring it completely. She rounded the corner to the pantry where she had, against all rules, stored a silver Class K extinguisher, the only kind suitable for a grease fire. She burst through the kitchen doors. The scene was worse than she imagined. Julian was swatting at the flames on the wall with a towel, which had also caught fire. The ventilation hood was beginning to glow ominously. Smoke was billowing, thick and acrid, filling the upper part of the room. Maria, who had been coming in with a tray, stood frozen in the doorway, her face a mask of horror. Sterling and his guest appeared in the other doorway, their faces pale. "What in God's name is happening?" Sterling roared, but Lena was already in motion. The world narrowed to a sequence of tasks, the checklist from the red binder scrolling through her mind. This was her plan, her system brought to life. She was no longer just the housekeeper. She was the incident commander. "Maria!" Lena's voice was sharp, cutting through the panic. It wasn't a scream, it was a command. "Gas shut off. Now." Maria, shocked out of her paralysis by the familiar authority in Lena's voice, didn't hesitate. She ran to the emergency gas valve by the door, a large red lever Lena had insisted on showing her, and threw her weight on it. There was a dull clunk as the gas supply to the stove was cut. "Julian, get back," Lena ordered the terrified chef, who stumbled away from the flames, his small towel fire now extinguished. Lena pulled the pin on the Class K extinguisher. She remembered her own training notes: aim at the base, side to side. Short, controlled bursts. The white chemical foam shot out, smothering the burning pan with a thick, satisfying hiss. The flames vanished instantly. She then directed the nozzle upward, blanketing the burning wall and the edge of the smoldering ventilation hood. In less than 15 seconds, the fire was out. The smoke alarms, finally triggered by the density of the smoke, began to shriek, a deafening, belated cry of warning. The air was thick with the smell of chemicals and burnt oil, but the danger was over. Silence descended, broken only by the alarms and Julian's ragged breathing. Mr. Sterling stood in the doorway, his face a canvas of disbelief. His investor was beside him, looking not at the extinguished fire, but at Lena, his expression one of pure, unadulterated respect. He had just witnessed a masterclass in crisis management. Lena calmly put the extinguisher down. She walked over to Maria, who was shaking, and put a steadying hand on her shoulder. She looked at Maria and gave a quick, subtle hand signal. 3 fingers tapped against her palm. Situation contained. Initiate ventilation protocol. Maria nodded and, moving with a newfound purpose, went to the emergency ventilation switch, another of Lena's unsanctioned installations, and flipped it. A low hum started as powerful fans began to pull the smoke-filled air out of the kitchen. Did you feel that shift? The palpable transfer of power in the room. Sterling had been a helpless, raging bystander. Lena had been calm, decisive, and utterly in control. Sterling finally found his voice. It was a choked, incredulous whisper. "How?" Lena turned to face him, her expression unreadable. The smoke swirled around her, and in that moment she seemed taller, more formidable than he had ever seen her. The uniform she wore was no longer a symbol of servitude. It was the uniform of an expert who had just done her job. "I was prepared," she said simply. His eyes darted from the foam-covered stove to the correct extinguisher in her hand, to the gas valve Maria had shut off. He was a systems man. He was looking at the flawless execution of a system he did not recognize, a system he had actively tried to destroy. That extinguisher. "It's not in the manual," he said, his mind catching on the details. "No, sir," Lena replied. "It's in the binder." The investor stepped forward, looking past Sterling and directly at Lena. "Young man," he said to the stunned chef, "you are very lucky that woman is on the payroll." He then turned to Sterling. "Forget the scallops, Charles. Tell me more about your head of staff. She seems to be your single greatest asset." The words landed in the shocked silence of the kitchen. Mr. Sterling, a man who dealt in assets and liabilities his entire life, was being told that the woman he had dismissed, threatened, and isolated was the most valuable thing he owned. He stared at Lena, truly seeing her for the first time, and the foundation of his rigidly controlled world began to crumble. The investor left an hour later, the deal unofficially sealed, not by Sterling's pitch, but by the undeniable competence he had just witnessed. The ruined kitchen was cleaned up by a silent, efficient staff. Julian, the chef, was quietly dismissed, and Lena was summoned once again to Mr. Sterling's study. This time, the atmosphere was entirely different. There was no arrogance, no casual dismissal. The room was the same monument to power, but the man inside it seemed diminished, his certainty shattered. "Sit down, Miss Vance," he said. It was not a command, but a request. She sat. On the polished expanse of his desk between them was the red binder. He had retrieved it from her office himself. "Walk me through it," he said, his voice quiet, stripped of its usual bluster. "Start from the moment you heard the scream." Lena did. She spoke in calm, declarative sentences, laying out the sequence of events and her responses. She explained the different classes of fire, the mechanics of a grease fire flashover, the importance of the gas shutoff, and the role of a pre-designated muster point for accountability. She explained that under his official protocol, the staff would have evacuated, the fire would have spread through the ventilation system, and the damage would have been, at a minimum, catastrophic. The fire department's average response time to their remote location was 12 minutes. She had controlled the blaze in 15 seconds. He listened without interruption, his hands steepled before him. He was not just hearing her words, He was processing the data, analyzing the system he had so arrogantly dismissed. He was seeing the immense, dangerous gap between his legally sound procedures and her reality-based ones. What does real justice look like here? Is it a simple apology, a raise, or something more? When she was finished, he was silent for a long time. The damage to the kitchen is estimated at $50,000, he finally said. The fire department chief whom I spoke to estimates that without your intervention, we would be looking at a total loss of the West Wing, $8 million, perhaps more. He opened a drawer in his desk and took out a checkbook. I am a man who rewards exceptional performance. I am prepared to offer you a bonus of $100,000 and a promotion, Director of Household Operations. You would have my full authority to rewrite the manual. It was the ultimate validation. The money, the title, the power, everything she had earned. Lena looked at the checkbook, then back at him, and she shook her head. No, thank you, Mr. Sterling, she said. He looked genuinely stunned. I don't understand. This was never about a reward for me. It wasn't about a title or more money, she said, her voice filled with a quiet, unshakable dignity. This was for Maria, so she would know what to do. It was for Chloe and for the gardeners and for the chef who had no idea how much danger he was in. It was for everyone who works in a house they don't have a map for. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze intense. I don't want a bonus, I want a promise. I want you to understand that the people who keep your world running are your most valuable asset, and their safety is not a line item in a budget to be minimized. It is the foundation of everything. Her ask was not for personal gain. It was for systemic change. It was a form of soft justice aimed not at punishment but at enlightenment. I will help you rewrite the manual, she continued. But I don't want the new title. My title is head housekeeper. It's what I do. And the new protocols shouldn't just be for this house. They should be for all of your properties, for everyone who works under the Sterling name. He stared at her, the offer of money and power lying uselessly between them. She had refused to be the person he thought she was, someone motivated by the same things that motivated him. She was asking not for a reward, but for him to become a better, more responsible man. The stakeholders in this proposal were not just him and her, but dozens of unseen staff across the globe, and the weight of that responsibility was now resting entirely on his shoulders. For 2 days, a strange quiet fell over the estate. Mr. Sterling was unseen, locked away in his study. Lena continued her duties, the house running with its usual quiet hum. Maria and the other staff watched her with a new reverence, but Lena deflected their praise. The work wasn't finished. A single battle won did not mean the war for real change was over. On the 3rd day, a black helicopter landed on the lawn. Out stepped 3 people in severe, dark suits, carrying briefcases. They were not guests. They were Sterling's corporate troubleshooters, the elite risk management team from his global headquarters in London. They didn't ask for Mr. Sterling. They asked for Miss Vance. Lena met them in the formal boardroom, a space she was usually only tasked with cleaning. They sat at the long, polished table, and for the next 48 hours they deconstructed the red binder. They were sharp, professional, and skeptical at first. They peppered her with questions, running scenarios, challenging her assumptions. But Lena was unshakable. She knew the terrain. She spoke their language of risk mitigation, asset protection, and human factors. She didn't just present her system. She defended it with the cold, hard data of her experience. She explained why a one-size-fits-all manual failed to account for architectural nuances, why staff intuition needed to be trained and trusted, not suppressed. By the end of the 2nd day, the lead consultant, a stern woman named Miss Albright, closed her laptop and looked at Lena with a newfound respect. Your system is not just better, Miss Vance, she said. It's paradigm shifting. We focus on post-incident liability. You focus on pre-incident survival. It's elegant. The result of that meeting was not a revised manual. It was a complete institutional overhaul. The project was given a name, the Sterling Residential Safety Protocol. It was a comprehensive, multi-layered system based entirely on Lena's binder. It included customized architectural diagrams for each property, color-coded emergency responses, and mandatory, hands-on monthly drills for all staff. But the most revolutionary part was what Miss Albright called the Vance Principle. It empowered on-site managers to make real-time, dynamic decisions, trusting their judgment over a rigid, pre-written script. The protocol was digitized, translated into 7 languages, and loaded onto secure servers. An executive order from Mr. Sterling made its implementation mandatory across all 12 of his global properties, from his penthouse in Dubai to his ski lodge in Aspen. Enforcement would be handled by regional managers, who were now required to file quarterly drill reports directly with Miss Albright's team. Any estate that failed its quarterly review would have its entire management team replaced. Would this change be enough in your workplace? Lena was asked to lead the first training seminar, not in person but via a secure video conference. They offered to fly her to London, put her up in a fine hotel. She declined. She would do it from her office, from the place where the work was actually done. The change had begun. It was no longer just her quiet rebellion. It was now official policy, backed by the full weight and authority of the Sterling Empire. The system hadn't just been tweaked, it had been fundamentally rewritten. A few weeks later, Lena was walking the grounds at dusk, a rare moment of peace for herself. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and cut grass. The relentless pressure of the past month had eased, replaced by the steady, purposeful work of implementing the new protocols. She was coordinating with estate managers from around the world, answering their questions, refining the system for their unique environments. She heard footsteps on the gravel path behind her and turned to see Mr. Sterling approaching. He was not in a suit or a pristine polo shirt. He was wearing a simple sweater and walking with his hands in his pockets. He looked less like a titan of industry and more like just a man. He fell into step beside her, and for a long time they walked in silence. It wasn't the tense, judgmental silence of before. It was a different kind of quiet, one of contemplation, of a truce having been reached. "The manager at the Aspen Lodge has a question," he said finally, his voice calm. "He's concerned about the muster point location. It's clear in summer, but in winter, it can be under 10 feet of snow. He's suggesting a secondary, indoor location in the guest wing." Lena considered it. "That makes sense," she said, "but the guest wing's power is on a separate grid. In a blizzard, it could go out. The indoor muster point needs its own backup generator and a satellite phone. I'll add a sub-protocol for extreme weather environments." They were having a simple, professional conversation. He had come to her not with an order but with a problem, seeking her expertise. They were colleagues, equals in this specific arena, discussing logistics. This quiet, respectful exchange was more healing than any formal apology could ever be. It was an acknowledgement of her value, a restoration of the professional dignity he had once tried to strip away. "Miss Albright tells me your system has already been flagged by our insurance carrier," Sterling said as they neared the Rose Garden. "They want to study it. They believe it could set a new industry standard for high-value residential properties." Lena simply nodded. She had never set out to change an industry. She had only wanted to keep Maria safe. As they stood by the roses, their blooms dark in the twilight, he turned to her. "I've spent my life building systems to protect my assets," he said, his gaze distant. "It never occurred to me that the most important systems are the ones that protect your people. Your binder, it found a flaw in my thinking, a fundamental one." He looked at her, and for the first time she saw not a boss or a tyrant, but a man humbled by a truth he had been blind to. "Thank you, Miss Vance," he said. It was all he needed to say. It was everything. She had not just changed his rules, she had changed him. And in doing so, she had reclaimed her own self-definition. She was not the help. She was the architect, whose voice helped you heal when no one was there to clap for you. For Lena, it was the quiet voice of earned respect, speaking to her in a twilight garden. The day of the first global training seminar arrived. The staff office had been transformed. A professional-grade camera, microphone, and lighting rig had been installed, all of it operated by a discreet technician from Sterling's corporate team. On a large monitor, a dozen windows showed the faces of estate managers from around the world, a diverse group of men and women, all looking on with expressions of curiosity and skepticism. Lena stood before the camera. They had offered to buy her a suit, to have a tailor flown in. She had politely refused. She wore her immaculate head housekeeper uniform, a simple gray dress with a crisp white collar. It was who she was. Her authority didn't come from a tailored jacket, it came from the knowledge she possessed. On a lectern beside her was a copy of the old red binder, its plastic cover worn at the edges. Mr. Sterling himself appeared on the screen from his London office to give the introduction. The manager sat up straighter. "Good morning," he began, his voice crisp and authoritative. "As you know, we are here today to implement a new mandatory safety protocol across all Sterling properties. For years, we have operated under a system I believed to be sufficient. I was wrong." A ripple of shock went through the virtual room. Mr. Sterling did not admit error. The existing system was flawed. "It was exposed not by a consultant or a lawsuit, but by one of our own," he continued, his gaze fixed on the camera. "The new system, which we are calling the Sterling Protocol, was developed entirely by the head housekeeper at my primary residence. She is the expert in this room. Her system works. I have seen it work under extreme pressure." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "I am now turning this meeting over to Miss Lena Vance, the architect of the Sterling Protocol. Listen to her." Recognition done right. Agree. His window on the screen minimized, leaving Lena as the sole speaker. The camera zoomed in on her. She looked directly into the lens, her gaze calm and steady, as if she were speaking to each of the 12 managers individually. "Good morning," she said, her voice clear and resonant. "Let's begin with page 1, situational awareness. Before you can manage a crisis, you must first learn to see." There was no grandstanding, no "I told you so." She didn't mention the fire or the conflicts. She simply taught. She shared her knowledge with a quiet, confident authority that was more powerful than any title. She wasn't a hero recounting a battle. She was a professional sharing a better way to work. She spoke of sightlines and human behavior under stress. She talked about Class K extinguishers and secondary muster points. She answered their questions with patience and precision. She was not just giving them a new rule book. She was giving them a new way of seeing their responsibilities. As she spoke, the skepticism on the faces of the managers melted away, replaced by scribbled notes and nods of understanding. They were not being lectured by a corporate drone. They were being mentored by a master of her craft. A door was opening, not just for Lena, but for all the other unseen, underestimated experts working in support roles throughout the vast Sterling empire. Her quiet competence had just been given a global stage. A week after the seminar, a large, heavy box arrived at the estate, addressed to Lena. Maria helped her carry it to the staff office. Inside, nestled in crisp tissue paper, were 20 professionally printed spiral-bound books. The cover was a deep, glossy red, almost identical to the color of her original binder. The title was embossed in elegant silver letters, the Sterling Residential Safety Protocol, and beneath it in a smaller, dignified font were the words authored by Lena Vance. Version 1.0. Lena ran her fingers over her name. She picked up one of the books. It smelled of fresh ink and new paper. She opened it. Her hand-drawn diagrams had been converted into clean, precise digital schematics. Her checklists were now formatted in a clear, easy-to-read typeface. But the words, the system, the core of it, was all hers. The soul of her red binder was preserved within this new, official vessel. She turned to the first page. There was a small, italicized dedication she hadn't written. It read, "For those who see what others don't. Your care is the foundation upon which everything else is built." She looked up and saw Maria watching her, her eyes shining. Maria had been there when Mr. Sterling had called the red binder a scrapbook and a waste of time. She had seen it dismissed and forbidden. And now she was looking at its final form, the official rulebook, the ultimate symbol of vindication. Did the object's meaning change for you too? Lena took one of the new manuals and handed it to Maria. She then picked up the old red binder from her desk, its plastic cover scuffed, a few pages dog-eared from use. She held the two objects side by side, the prototype and the product, the rebellion and the resolution. "Then," Lena said softly, holding up the old binder, "this was just an idea, a secret." She then held up the new printed manual. "Now, this is a promise. It's a promise to you and to everyone else that you will be kept safe." The symbol had completed its journey. It had started as a private tool of a misunderstood expert, a container for knowledge the system refused to see. It had become a catalyst for conflict, a defiant symbol of a better way. And now it was transformed. It was no longer a personal binder. It was an institutional shield. It was the quiet, undeniable proof that one person's integrity, when held onto tightly enough, could become a legacy that protected hundreds. She placed the old binder on a shelf, a historical artifact. The new one she placed in the center of her desk, ready for the work that was still to come. Months later, the scene repeats. It is a bright, clear afternoon on the impossibly green lawn of the Sterling estate. Lena stands in the same spot where the story began. Before her are not 2 but 6 members of the household staff, including Maria, who now moves with the calm confidence of a veteran. Lena gives a silent hand signal, 2 fingers for a fire emergency. The team doesn't hesitate. They move with a quiet, practiced precision. One runs to mime shutting off the gas valve, another retrieves the correct class of extinguisher, and the rest proceed in an orderly fashion toward the designated muster point by the old oak tree. It's not a game or a pantomime. It's a finely tuned machine of human coordination, a dance of safety she has choreographed. On the stone porch of the main house, Mr. Sterling stands watching. He holds a tablet on which he is live streaming the drill to Miss Albright in London as a demonstration of a successful implementation. He is not watching with suspicion, not looking for flaws or reasons to criticize. He is watching with a quiet, profound approval. He is not supervising Lena. He is observing the flawless function of her system, a system he is now proud to have his name on. Lena gives a final hand signal, a closed fist held over her heart. All clear, accounted for, secure. The drill concludes. The staff members don't look afraid or resentful of the extra work. They look prepared. They look safe. A quiet murmur of conversation starts among them as they relax, a sense of shared competence bonding them together. The house behind them seems to stand differently, no longer just a monument of wealth and power but a place of genuine safety, its unseen vulnerabilities now mapped, managed, and protected. This is the tangible sign of continuity. This is her legacy. Lena turns her head slightly and her eyes meet Mr. Sterling's across the lawn. He gives her a single, respectful nod. She returns it. No words are necessary. The room, the entire estate, has been changed, not by a hostile takeover or a dramatic confrontation, but by the steady, undeniable force of quiet excellence. Her work had not given her a new title or a corner office. It had given her something far more valuable, a lasting impact. It had rewritten the rules, not just on paper but in the culture of the house itself. The final image is of Lena standing on the lawn, the quiet center of the world she has remade. The stillness is not one of tension but of peace. The dignity is not demanded but earned. The house is safe. The people are safe. The work is done. Whose quiet excellence in your own life has become the standard you now follow.